If you'd told me 5 years ago that I'd be sitting at a dinner table watching my parents' jaws drop in disbelief as my fiancé reached for my hand, I would have laughed. Or maybe cried. Or both. My name is Luna, and for most of my life, love felt like a foreign language, one my parents insisted I'd never be fluent in. They didn't say it to be cruel, at least not intentionally. But their words, their doubts, their sideways glances at family gatherings all added up to a silent chorus. You're different. Love isn't for people like you. I grew up in a house where love was measured in achievements. My parents, both first-generation immigrants, believed in hard work, discipline, and practicality. They loved me, I know they did, but their love was the kind you had to earn. A perfect report card, a trophy, a scholarship, these were the currencies of affection. Hugs were rare, I love you even rarer. And when it came to romance, well, that was a luxury for other people's children. I was the odd one out, the dreamer, the kid who wrote poetry in the margins of math homework, who got lost in books about faraway places and impossible loves. My parents didn't understand me. And I learned early on not to expect them to. They wanted me to be practical, to choose a sensible career, to marry someone appropriate, someone who ticked all the boxes they'd drawn up in their heads. But I was awkward, shy, and if I'm honest, a little weird. I didn't fit the mold, and I need it. By the time I hit my 20s, the message was clear. Love was for other people. My parents never said it outright, but their disappointment was palpable every time I came home alone for the holidays. My mother would sigh, my father would ask about my plans, and I'd retreat to my childhood bedroom, feeling smaller with every visit. I started to believe them. Maybe I was unlovable. Maybe I was too much, or not enough, or just wrong in some fundamental way. It's funny how those beliefs burrow into your bones. I dated, of course, I tried, but every relationship felt like a performance, an audition for a role I was never going to get. I'd watch my friends fall in love, get engaged, post smiling photos with captions like, my person, and I'd wonder what was wrong with me. Why couldn't I have that? Why did love seem so easy for everyone else? The truth is, I was scared. Scared of being rejected, of confirming my parents' worst fears, scared of letting someone see the real me, the messy, complicated, not always practical me. So I kept my guard up. I made jokes, played it cool, pretended I didn't care. But inside, I was lonely. Desperately, achingly lonely. Then, on a rainy Thursday, everything changed. I was at a coffee shop, nursing a lukewarm latte and pretending to read a book I'd already finished. I was people-watching, as usual, inventing stories for the strangers around me. That's when I saw him. He was sitting by the window, sketching in a battered notebook, his brow furrowed in concentration. There was something about him, something gentle, open, unguarded. I couldn't look away. He caught me staring and smiled. Not the smug, self-assured smile I'd come to expect from guys in coffee shops, but a shy, genuine smile that made my heart stutter. I looked away, embarrassed, but when I glanced back, he was still looking at me, still smiling. I don't know what possessed me, but I got up and walked over. My hands were shaking. My voice was barely above a whisper. "What are you guying?" I asked, hoping I didn't sound as nervous as I felt. He turned the notebook so I could see. It was a sketch of the coffee shop. People hunched over laptops, a barista steaming milk, a couple arguing quietly in the corner. It was beautiful, detailed but not perfect, real. We started talking about art, about books, about the rain tapping against the window. His name was Alex. He was an illustrator, working on a children's book. He asked about me, and for the first time in a long time, I told the truth. I told him about my writing, my family, my fears. He listened, really listened. And when I finished, he didn't look away. He didn't flinch. He just smiled that same gentle smile and said, "You're not too much. You're just enough." We spent hours in that coffee shop, lost in conversation. When it was time to leave, he asked if he could see me again. I said yes. I wanted to say yes to everything. Our relationship wasn't a fairy tale. There were awkward moments, misunderstandings, and more than a few tears. But with Alex, I felt seen, accepted, loved not in spite of my quirks, but because of them. He made me believe for the first time that maybe my parents were wrong. Maybe love was possible for me, after all. But I was still scared. Scared of what my parents would think. Scared of introducing them to someone who didn't fit their checklist. Alex was kind, creative, and a little unconventional. He didn't have a real job, at least not by my parents' standards. He wasn't from our community. He didn't speak our language. I worried they'd judge him, or worse, judge me for choosing him. For months, I put off the inevitable. I made excuses, dodged questions, kept Alex and my family in separate worlds. But love, real love, doesn't want to be hidden. It wants to be seen, to be celebrated. And Alex deserved that. So did I. The decision to finally introduce Alex to my parents wasn't a single dramatic moment. It was more like a slow, persistent ache, a growing sense that I couldn't keep living two separate lives. Every time Alex asked about my family, I felt a pang of guilt. Every time my parents asked about my future, I felt a wave of shame. I was tired of hiding, tired of pretending. I wanted to be honest, even if it meant risking everything. Alex never pressured me. He understood my fears, maybe better than I did. He'd grown up in a family that valued creativity and self-expression, but he knew what it was like to feel like an outsider. He told me, gently, that he'd wait as long as I needed, but I could see the hope in his eyes every time I mentioned my parents. He wanted to meet them, not just for my sake, but because he genuinely cared. He wanted to be part of my world. So one evening, after a long walk in the park, I told him, "I think I'm ready," I said, my voice trembling. "I want you to meet my parents." He squeezed my hand, his eyes shining with pride and relief. "Whenever you're ready," he said, "I'll be there." The days leading up to the dinner were a blur of anxiety and anticipation. I rehearsed conversations in my head, imagined every possible scenario, good and bad. I worried about what my parents would say, how they'd react, whether they'd embarrass me or, worse, embarrass Alex. I worried about the food, the seating arrangement, the weather. I worried about things I couldn't control and things I could. I called my mother and told her I wanted to bring someone special to dinner. There was a pause on the other end of the line, just long enough to make my heart race. "Someone special?" she repeated, her voice carefully neutral. "Yes," I said, forcing myself to sound confident. "His name is Alex. He is important to me." There was another pause, then a sigh. "Of course, bring him," she said. "We'll see you both on Sunday." I hung up, my hands shaking. It was happening. There was no turning back. The day of the dinner arrived, gray and drizzly. I spent hours getting ready, changing outfits a dozen times, second-guessing every choice. Alex showed up at my apartment with flowers for my mother and a bottle of wine for my father. He looked nervous but determined. "We've got this," he said, giving me a reassuring smile. I nodded, trying to believe him. The drive to my parents' house felt endless. My mind raced with memories, childhood dinners filled with awkward silences, tense conversations about my future, the unspoken pressure to be someone I wasn't. I glanced at Alex, who was humming softly to himself, and felt a surge of gratitude. No matter what happened tonight, I wasn't alone. We pulled into the driveway, and I took a deep breath. "Ready?" I asked. Alex nodded. "Let's do this." My parents' house looked the same as always. Neat, orderly, a little too perfect. My mother opened the door, her expression polite but guarded. She took the flowers with a tight smile, thanked Alex for the wine, and ushered us inside. My father was waiting in the living room, his arms crossed, his face unreadable. Introductions were awkward. My parents asked Alex about his job, his family, his plans for the future. He answered honestly, but I could sense their skepticism. My mother frowned when he mentioned his art. My father raised an eyebrow when he talked about freelancing. I tried to steer the conversation to safer topics, but it felt like walking a tightrope. Dinner was a tense affair. My mother had cooked all my childhood favorites, dishes she knew I loved, but that Alex had never tried. He was gracious, complimenting her cooking, asking questions about the recipes. My father remained mostly silent, watching Alex with a critical eye. At one point, my mother asked, "So, Alex, what do your parents do?" He smiled and explained that his mother was a teacher and his father a musician. My mother pursed her lips, clearly unimpressed. "And you draw pictures for a living?" she asked, her tone sharp. I felt my cheeks burn. Alex didn't flinch. "I illustrate children's books," he said. "It's something I'm passionate about. I love helping kids see the world in new ways." My father grunted. "But is it stable? Can you support a family with that?" Alex met his gaze, steady and calm. "It's not always easy, but I make it work. I believe in what I do." The conversation moved on, but the tension lingered. I could feel my parents' disappointment, their silent judgment. I wanted to scream, to defend Alex, to tell them how much he meant to me, but I stayed quiet, afraid of making things worse. After dinner, we moved to the living room for tea. My mother brought out a tray of pastries, and my father poured tea with practiced precision. The conversation turned to me, my job, my plans, my future. My parents asked the same questions they always did, their voices laced with concern. Alex listened quietly, his hand resting on my knee. When my mother asked, "So, do you really think this is the right path for you?" I hesitated. For a moment, I felt like a child again, desperate for approval. But then Alex squeezed my hand, grounding me. I looked at him, saw the love and pride in his eyes, and found my voice. "Yes," I said, my voice steady. "I do. I'm happy. I'm doing what I love." My parents exchanged a look, their faces tight with worry. I knew they didn't understand. Maybe they never would. As the evening wore on, the conversation grew more relaxed. My mother asked Alex about his favorite books. My father told a story about his own childhood. There were moments of laughter, moments of connection. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. When it was time to leave, my mother hugged me, a little tighter than usual. My father shook Alex's hand, his grip firm. "Take care of her," he said, his voice gruff. Alex smiled. "I will, sir." We walked to the car in silence, the rain falling softly around us. When we were safely inside, I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. Alex reached for my hand, his eyes shining with pride. "You did great," he said. I smiled, tears prickling at the corners of my eyes. We did great. The drive home that night was quiet, but it wasn't the heavy silence I'd feared. Instead, it was a gentle, reflective hush, the kind that settles in when something important has happened and you're both turning it over in your minds. I glanced at Alex, his profile illuminated by the passing streetlights, and felt a wave of gratitude. He had faced my parents' skepticism with grace and honesty, never once pretending to be someone he wasn't. I realized in that moment how rare and precious that was. When we got back to my apartment, I kicked off my shoes and collapsed onto the couch exhausted. Alex sat beside me, pulling me close. "How do you feel?" he asked softly. I thought about it. I felt raw, exposed, but also strangely relieved. "I think I'm okay," I said. "I was so scared they'd hate you, or that you'd hate them, or that I'd have to choose. But it wasn't as bad as I thought." Alex smiled, brushing a strand of hair from my face. "Your parents love you. I could see it, even if they don't always know how to show it. And I love you too. We'll figure this out together." His words settled over me like a warm blanket. For the first time in years, I felt hopeful. Maybe things wouldn't be perfect, but maybe they didn't have to be. Maybe love was about showing up even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. The days that followed were a strange mix of tension and possibility. My parents didn't call right away, and I found myself checking my phone obsessively, waiting for some sign of approval or rejection. When my mother finally did call, her voice was softer than usual. She asked how I was, how Alex was, if we'd gotten home safely. She didn't say much about the dinner, but I could hear the questions she wasn't asking. I told her the truth, that I was happy, that Alex made me feel seen and loved in a way I'd never experienced before. There was a long pause, and then she said, "That's good, sweetheart. That's all a mother wants for a child." It wasn't a blessing, exactly, but it was something, a crack in the wall. Alex and I settled into a new rhythm. We spent weekends exploring the city, trying new restaurants, visiting art galleries. He'd sketch in his notebook while I scribbled story ideas on napkins. We talked about everything, our dreams, our fears, the future we wanted to build together. For the first time, I let myself imagine a life that wasn't dictated by my parents' expectations. A life that was messy and unpredictable, but real. But the shadow of my parents' doubts still lingered. Every time we talked about taking the next step, moving in together, getting engaged, I felt a knot of anxiety in my stomach. What would my parents say? Would they ever truly accept Alex? Would I always feel like I was disappointing them? One evening, as we walked along the river, Alex stopped and turned to me. "I know this isn't easy," he said, "but I want you to know that I'm in this for the long haul. I want to build a life with you, whatever that looks like. I want to be your family, if you'll let me." Tears sprang to my eyes. I realized in that moment that I'd been waiting for permission from my parents, from the world, from myself, to be happy. But happiness wasn't something you earned. It was something you chose. I threw my arms around Alex, laughing through my tears. "Yes," I whispered. "I want that too." We started talking about the future in earnest. We looked at apartments, made lists of places we wanted to travel, talked about what kind of wedding we might want someday. It felt surreal, like stepping into someone else's life, but it was ours, and that made all the difference. When Alex proposed, it wasn't a grand gesture or a public spectacle. It was a quiet Sunday morning, sunlight streaming through the window, the smell of coffee in the air. He knelt beside the bed, holding out a simple ring, his eyes shining with love and hope. "I want to spend my life with you," he said. "Will you marry me?" I said yes, of course, 1,000 times yes. We called our friends, our siblings, everyone who had cheered us on from the sidelines. The only people left were my parents. I agonized over how to tell them. I wanted them to be happy for me, to share in my joy, but I was terrified they'd react with disappointment or disapproval. Alex held my hand as I dialed their number, his presence steady and reassuring. My mother answered, her voice warm but cautious. I took a deep breath and told her the news. There was a long silence, and then she said, "Congratulations, sweetheart." I could hear the emotion in her voice, the struggle to reconcile her hopes for me with the reality of my choices. My father was quieter. He asked practical questions about the wedding, about our plans, about where we'd live. He didn't say much, but when we hung up, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. They hadn't disowned me, they hadn't cut me off. It wasn't the enthusiastic blessing I dreamed of, but it was enough. As the weeks passed, my parents began to thaw. My mother called more often, asking about wedding plans, offering advice on everything from venues to flowers. My father sent Alex a book about marriage, with a note inside, "For the journey ahead." It was awkward, but it was a start. Alex and I threw ourselves into wedding planning, navigating the minefield of family expectations and cultural traditions. There were arguments, compromises, moments of doubt. But through it all, we leaned on each other, reminding ourselves why we were doing this in the first place. We decided to have a small engagement dinner, just our immediate families. I was nervous, but also excited. This was our chance to bring everyone together, to show my parents that love didn't have to look the way they'd always imagined. The night of the engagement dinner, I stood in the kitchen, my hands shaking as I arranged flowers on the table. Alex came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist. Whatever happens tonight, he whispered, I'm proud of you. I'm proud of us. I turned to face him, my heart full. Me too, I said, no matter what. The hours before the engagement dinner felt like a slow-motion replay of every anxious moment I'd ever experienced. I kept checking the clock, straightening the tablecloth, rearranging the flowers, and fussing over the menu. Alex, ever the calm in my storm, moved through the apartment with quiet confidence, setting out plates and lighting candles. He'd even made place cards, each one decorated with a tiny hand-drawn illustration. A subtle, loving touch that made me smile despite my nerves. As the doorbell rang, my heart leapt into my throat. Alex squeezed my hand, and together we opened the door to greet our families. My parents arrived first, my mother carrying a homemade cake, my father clutching a bottle of wine. They looked around the apartment, taking in the art on the walls, the mismatched chairs, the evidence of two lives blending together. My mother's eyes lingered on the photos of Alex and me, laughing in the park, bundled up at a winter market, holding hands on a beach. She didn't say anything, but I saw something soften in her expression. Alex's parents arrived soon after, warm and effusive, their arms full of flowers and gifts. The introductions were awkward at first, but Alex's mother quickly broke the ice with a story about Alex as a child, drawing on the walls and insisting it was art. Laughter rippled around the table, and I felt some of the tension melt away. We sat down to dinner, a patchwork of dishes from both families' traditions. There was my mother's famous biryani, Alex's father's roasted vegetables, and a salad I'd thrown together at the last minute. Conversation flowed in fits and starts, sometimes stilted, sometimes easy. My parents asked polite questions about Alex's family, and his parents responded with warmth and humor. I watched as my father and Alex's father found common ground over their mutual love of chess, and my mother and Alex's mother exchanged recipes. But beneath the surface, I could feel the undercurrent of uncertainty. My parents were still wary, still unsure if this was the life they'd hoped for me. I caught my mother glancing at Alex when she thought I wasn't looking, her eyes searching for something. Reassurance, maybe, or understanding. As the meal wound down, Alex stood up and cleared his throat. The room fell silent, all eyes on him. He reached for my hand, his fingers warm and steady. I want to spend my life with you, he began, his voice clear and sincere. I want to thank you all for being here, for supporting us and for trusting us to build a life together. I know it hasn't always been easy, and I know we come from different worlds. But I love your daughter more than anything, and I promise to do everything I can to make her happy. He turned to my parents, his gaze unwavering. I know I'm not what you expected. I know I don't fit the mold, but I want you to know that I see her, the real her, the brilliant, creative, passionate woman you raised. And I love her, not in spite of who she is, but because of it. There was a long, heavy pause. My mother's eyes filled with tears, and my father looked down at his hands, his jaw working as he struggled to find the right words. Finally, my mother spoke, her voice trembling. We only ever wanted what was best for her. We worried she'd be lonely, that she'd never find someone who truly understood her. We didn't always know how to show it, but we love her. And we want her to be happy. She looked at Alex, her eyes shining. If you make her happy, that's all we can ask. My father cleared his throat, his voice gruff. You seem like a good man, Alex. I can see how much you care for her. That means a lot to us. The relief that washed over me was overwhelming. I squeezed Alex's hand, tears streaming down my face. For the first time, I felt seen. Not just by Alex, but by my parents.
They might not understand everything about our relationship, but they were willing to try. That was more than I dared hoped for.
The rest of the evening passed in a blur of laughter, stories, and shared memories. My parents and Alex's parents found more common ground than I'd expected, bonding over their children's quirks and the challenges of raising dreamers. By the time dessert was served, the atmosphere had shifted from tense to celebratory. After everyone had left, Alex and I sat on the couch, exhausted but elated. I leaned my head on his shoulder, letting the events of the night wash over me. "Did that really just happen?" I whispered. Alex laughed, his arm around me. "It did. Your parents are amazing. I can see where you get your strength." I smiled, feeling lighter than I had in years. I never thought I'd see the day. I always thought I'd have to choose between you and them, between love and family. But tonight it felt like maybe I don't have to. Alex kissed the top of my head. "You never have to choose. We're building something new, together, and your parents are part of that, if you want them to be." I nodded, tears prickling at my eyes again. I do. I really do. That night, as I drifted off to sleep in Alex's arms, I thought about all the times I doubted myself, all the times I believed I was unlovable or too different. I thought about my parents' fears, their hopes, their love, imperfect but real. And I thought about the future, bright and uncertain, but finally mine. The days after the engagement dinner felt like waking up in a new world. There was a lightness in my step, a sense of possibility I hadn't felt in years. My parents called the next morning, their voices softer, warmer. My mother wanted to know if I had leftovers, if Alex had enjoyed her cake, if we needed help with anything. My father asked about the wine, joking that Alex's taste was surprisingly good. It was as if a dam had broken and all the love and concern they'd kept bottled up for so long was finally flowing freely. Alex noticed the change too. He teased me about how often my phone buzzed with texts from my mother, recipes, wedding tips, even the occasional meme. "She's making up for lost time," he said, grinning. I laughed, but I knew he was right. My parents were trying, in their own way, to bridge the gap between us. It wasn't always smooth. There were still awkward moments, misunderstandings, and the occasional tense conversation, but the effort was there, and that meant everything. We started planning the wedding in earnest, a process that was equal parts exhilarating and overwhelming. My parents wanted a traditional ceremony, complete with all the rituals and customs they'd grown up with. Alex's family was more laid back, happy to go along with whatever made us happy. At first, I worried about pleasing everyone, about finding the perfect balance between our two worlds. But Alex reminded me, gently, that this was our day. He said, "We can honor our families, but we also have to honor ourselves." So we compromised. We chose a venue that felt like home, a cozy garden with twinkling lights and wildflowers. We incorporated traditions from both families, blending them into something uniquely ours. My mother helped me pick out a dress, her eyes shining with pride as she adjusted the hem. Alex's mother taught me how to make his favorite childhood dessert, laughing as we spilled flour all over the kitchen. My father and Alex's father built a wooden arch for the ceremony, working side by side in companionable silence. Through it all, Alex was my anchor. He listened to my worries, held me when I cried, made me laugh when the stress threatened to overwhelm me. He reminded me over and over that love wasn't about perfection. It was about showing up day after day, even when things were hard. One evening, as we sat on the balcony watching the sunset, Alex took my hand. "Do you remember the first time we met?" he asked, his voice soft. I smiled, remembering the coffee shop, the rain,
The way he'd looked at me like I was the only person in the world. Of course I do. He squeezed my hand. I knew, even then, that you were special. That you saw the world differently. I love that about you. I love all the things that make you you. I felt tears prick at my eyes again. I spent so long thinking I had to change, that I had to be someone else to be loved. But you make me feel like I'm enough, like I'm more than enough. Alex pulled me close, his arms warm and strong around me. You are, and I'm so grateful I get to spend my life with you. As the wedding day approached, my parents surprised me in ways I never expected. My mother offered to host a pre-wedding dinner, inviting both families and a few close friends. She spent days planning the menu, calling me for advice, asking about Alex's favorite dishes. My father, usually reserved, started sharing stories from his own courtship, how he'd won my mother over with persistence and a little bit of luck. At the dinner, my parents stood up to make a toast. My mother's voice trembled as she spoke. "We are so proud of our daughter," she said, her eyes shining. "She has always followed her heart, even when it was hard. And we are grateful for Alex for loving her, for seeing her the way we do." My father raised his glass, his voice gruff but full of emotion. "To new beginnings, to family." There was a moment of silence, and then everyone raised their glasses, the room filled with laughter and love. I looked at Alex, his eyes shining with tears, and knew that we had made it. We had built a bridge between our worlds, one step at a time. In the weeks leading up to the wedding, I found myself reflecting on everything that had brought us to this point. The doubts, the fears, the moments of despair, they were all part of the journey. My parents' skepticism had forced me to fight for what I wanted, to define happiness on my own terms. Alex's unwavering support had given me the courage to be vulnerable, to let love in even when it felt impossible. I realized, too, that my parents' doubts weren't just about me, they were about their own fears, the fear of losing me, of not understanding the world I was building, of being left behind. By inviting them in, by sharing my life with them, I was giving them a chance to grow, to change, to love in new ways. The night before the wedding, my mother came to my room, her eyes full of tears. She sat beside me on the bed, caking my hands in hers. "I'm sorry," she whispered, "for all the times I doubted you, for all the times I made you feel like you weren't enough. I was scared. I didn't want you to be hurt, to be lonely. But I see now how happy you are, and I'm so proud of you." I hugged her, tears streaming down my face. "Thank you, Mom. That means everything to me." As I drifted off to sleep that night, I felt a sense of peace I'd never known before. I was surrounded by love, imperfect, messy, but real. I was ready to step into the future, hand in hand with Alex, with my family by my side.
The morning of the wedding dawned bright and clear, sunlight streaming through the curtains and painting golden patterns on the floor. I woke before my alarm, heart pounding with a mix of excitement and nerves. For a moment, I lay still, listening to the quiet hum of the world outside, letting the reality of the day settle over me. Today, I would marry the person who saw me, truly saw me, and loved me for all that I was. Today, I would stand before my family, my friends, and promise to build the life that was honest, brave, and full of love. The hours before the ceremony passed in a blur of activity. My mother and Alex's mother fussed over my dress, smoothing wrinkles and pinning stray hairs. My friends surrounded me, their laughter and chatter a comforting soundtrack to my nerves. Every so often, my mother would pause, her eyes lingering on me with a mixture of pride and nostalgia. "You look beautiful," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Your father is going to cry when he sees you." I smiled, feeling a lump form in my throat. "Thank you, Mom, for everything." Down the hall, Alex was getting ready with his family. I could hear bursts of laughter, the clink of glasses, the low hum of music. I imagined him straightening his tie, running a hand through his hair, maybe pacing nervously the way he always did when he was excited. The thought made me smile. Even now, after everything we'd been through, I couldn't quite believe this was real. The ceremony was held in the garden, beneath the arch my father and Alex's father had built together. Wildflowers lined the aisle, their colors vibrant against the green grass. Our families and friends gathered in rows, their faces shining with anticipation. As I stepped out into the sunlight, arm in arm with my father, I felt a wave of emotion crash over me. My father squeezed my hand, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I'm proud of you," he whispered, his voice trembling. "You've always been brave. I hope you know that." I nodded, unable to speak, and together we walked down the aisle. Alex was waiting for me at the end, his eyes locked on mine, his smile wide and unguarded. In that moment, everything else faded away. The doubts, the fears, the years of feeling like I didn't belong. All that mattered was the love between us, the promise of a future we would build together. The ceremony itself was a blend of traditions, a tapestry woven from the threads of our two families. My mother recited a blessing in her native language, her voice steady and clear. Alex's father read a poem he'd written for us, his words full of hope and joy. We exchanged vows we'd written ourselves, promises to love, to listen, to grow together. There were tears, laughter, and a sense of unity that felt almost miraculous. When the officiant pronounced us married, the crowd erupted in applause. Alex pulled me into his arms, spinning me around as our families cheered. For the first time, I saw my parents not as obstacles to my happiness, but as witnesses to it. People who had shaped me, challenged me, and, in their own way, loved me fiercely. The reception was a celebration in every sense of the word. There was music, dancing, and food from both our cultures. My parents mingled with Alex's family, sharing stories and laughter. My father even joined Alex on the dance floor, their awkward steps quickly giving way to genuine joy. My mother pulled me aside at one point, her eyes shining. "I never imagined this," she said, gesturing to the crowd. "I never imagined I could feel so happy and so proud. You've taught me so much, my darling, about love, about courage, about what it means to be a family." I hugged her tightly, overwhelmed with gratitude. "You taught me too, more than you know." As the night wore on, I found myself reflecting on the journey that had brought us here. The years of feeling different, the weight of my parents' expectations, the fear that I would never be enough. All of it had led to this moment, a moment of acceptance, of joy, of belonging. Alex and I slipped away from the crowd for a few quiet minutes, standing together beneath the arch where we'd set our vows. The garden was bathed in moonlight, the air filled with the scent of flowers and the distant sound of laughter. "I can believe this is our life," I whispered, leaning into him. Alex smiled, his arms around me, "because we built it together. Every step, every challenge, every moment, it brought us here." I thought about the contrast between where I'd started and where I was now. The girl who had once believed she was unlovable, who had internalized her parents' doubts, was gone. In her place stood a woman who had fought for her happiness, who had learned to trust herself, who had found love not in spite of her differences, but because of them. We returned to the party, our hearts full. Our friends toasted us, sharing stories and memories, their words a testament to the community we'd built. My parents danced together, their faces alight with joy. Alex's family embraced me as one of their own. As the night drew to a close, I stood with Alex, watching our families laugh and celebrate together. I realized that love wasn't just about finding the right person. It was about creating the right circumstances, about choosing each other every day, about inviting others in, even when it was hard. I thought about my parents' journey, their fears and hopes, their willingness to change. I thought about Alex's patience, his unwavering belief in us.
And I thought about my own growth, the courage it had taken to be vulnerable, to ask for what I wanted, to believe that I deserved happiness. In that moment, I knew that my parents had been wrong, not because they didn't love me, but because they didn't yet understand the kind of love I needed. And that was okay. We had all learned together that love is bigger than fear, stronger than doubt, and more beautiful than we could have ever imagined. As the last guests drifted away and the garden lights flickered softly in the night, Alex and I lingered beneath the arch where we'd said our vows. The garden was bathed in moonlight, the air filled with the scent of flowers and the distant sound of laughter. I looked up at the stars, feeling the weight of the day settle into a gentle, glowing warmth inside me. Alex squeezed my hand, his eyes reflecting the moonlight. "We did it," he whispered, a smile tugging at his lips. I nodded, emotions swelling in my chest. We really did. And not just the wedding, all of it. We made it through the doubts, the fears, the hard conversations. We found our way. He brushed a strand of hair from my face, his touch tender. I always believed in us, even when it was hard, especially then. I thought about my parents, of the journey we'd all taken together. I remembered the girl I used to be, so desperate for approval, so afraid of being different. I remembered the pain of feeling misunderstood, the ache of wanting to belong. And I realized, standing there with Alex, that I had found belonging, not by changing who I was, but by embracing it, by letting love in, even when it was scary, by trusting that I was enough. My parents joined us for a moment, their faces tired but happy. My mother hugged me, her arms strong and sure. "You're our daughter," she said softly. "We love you. We always have. We just needed to learn how to show it." My father nodded, his eyes shining. "You taught us more than we ever taught you." We stood together, the four of us, a family remade by love and understanding. I knew there would still be challenges, still be moments of doubt and fear, but I also knew that we would face them together, stronger for all we had overcome. As Alex and I walked back inside, hand in hand, I felt a quiet certainty settle over me. My parents had once said I'd never find love, but love had found me, in the most unexpected, beautiful way. And in that moment, I knew I was exactly where I was meant to be. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If you've ever felt different or doubted yourself because of what others said, just remember, you are enough and your story matters. If you enjoyed this journey with me, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your own experiences in the comments below. Your support means the world to me, and I can't wait to share more stories with you. Until next time, this is Luna, wishing you love, courage, and the confidence to follow your own heart.